Okay, so here's a short review of Path of Exile 2 in early access. It's hard to believe that this game actually came out after all the waiting. In recent years, you'd constantly hear that Path of Exile 2 is going to be the Diablo killer, and after playing it, I can confirm that this game is really good, but it is a change that some people won't like. So first, I need to admit that I am a piece of shit filthy casual and I never played the first game. So I'll be talking about this game as a person that's just looking to play a new ARPG and not some scum game journalist that pretends to be a gamer and review games based off the amount on the check. For those who don't know what kind of game this game is basically Diablo if Blizzard gave a shit about its consumers and developers. Path of Exile 2 is an action RPG where you choose a character with a class and grind the hell out of it through multiple acts of the story, skill points, spells and abilities, loot, hordes of enemies, bosses, and infinite amounts of dopamine rushing through your sleep-deprived brain. You start off by choosing a class that has a fixed character. So for my first class, I picked the monk because, to be honest with you, it looked pretty cool in the previews. I usually like playing as a class that prioritizes range attacks like a sorcerer, for example, and the monk kind of starts off very up close and personal, but around level 23-ish, I turn my monk into a very good mix of melee and range. Right now, the game has 6 classes to choose from in early access, and you basically play through the story from Act 1 to 3 and repeat it in a harder difficulty before endgame. When the game officially releases, I think it'll have 12 classes and 6 acts. Let's talk about the game's combat. Holy fuck, it's good. I remember playing Diablo 4 and getting bored after like 3 days because it felt like I was zoning out, smashing buttons and watching things happen on the screen without engaging my brain or even thinking about what's actually happening. Listen, I know that's why a lot of players play these games, but that's just not for me. It felt more repetitive than Warframe. Path of Exile 2 introduced WASD movement and more accessible default keys for abilities. Obviously, point and click is still an option. This game's combat is so satisfying that in the morning I can't wake up without thinking about getting back on. I don't know what it is. The animations, particle effects, sound effects, the ability to roll without a cooldown like it's a Souls game, the difficulty, all of it? I don't know. Whatever it is, I'm loving it. I don't know exactly how to explain this, but it feels like I'm actually engaged in the combat and I'm constantly trying to optimize my moves. In Diablo 4, I was looking up at the ceiling while smashing keys, but this I actually pay attention to.
Soul core is charged. Why don't you do the honors? Oh dear. Now we just have to remove it from that giant construct. Good luck.
And the bosses, man, holy shit. They are harder than my Johnny Cockblaster during a session of Dungeons and Dragons by myself on a Saturday night. Okay, so this is where I can talk about why the game isn't for every diehard ARPG player. This game is a mix of a Souls-like and an ARPG. Bosses are crazy tough and dying is expected. No boss acts the same, and it takes time to truly understand every boss's moves, and that's through physical and audio cues. I'm sorry for constantly bringing up the game, but in Diablo 4, I felt like I was just running around hitting keys and begging for the boss's health bar to drain faster. The bosses in this game look amazing, have very smooth animations, great voice acting, and beating them feels as good as beating an Elden Ring boss. It's a hell of a challenge, and damn, you actually need to pay attention and make some smart decisions. The game has a map for each act and many zones and points of interest in each map, with many bosses and loot caches. The graphics are amazing for a game like this, but my issue is that I feel like each zone is a little too repetitive, since you're always running around looking at the same aisles with repeated textures and killing the same enemies over and over again for like 30 minutes until you find either a single checkpoint or a room that takes you to another zone to do the exact same thing until you finally find the boss. I get 90% of these games in a genre are like this, and this usually isn't for me, but the combat is just so good that I kept going without complaining. There really isn't much to explore besides the rare moments of finding good loot that most of the times isn't even meant for your build. I also get that devs build their maps out like this so that, maybe you could level up a bunch of times before you see the boss, and sometimes I actually appreciate that. I also wish checkpoints were a bit closer, or maybe fast travel to them. That would have been pretty nice. So for example, last night I was playing and I finally found the zone boss after searching for like 30 minutes, and a friend asked for help with a boss that I had mastered, and I couldn't help them because if I did, returning back to my boss meant that I had to search through a new instance of my zone just to find the boss again. The game has a story that I haven't felt really focused on, but there were a few quests that I was actually engaged in and gave my fighting a purpose. Good writing, great voice acting, and so far acts 1 to 3 have been pretty nice. They're challenging and I'm looking forward to what grinding gear games will do with the rest of the game. I'll be honest, the game doesn't really start to open up until halfway through Act 2, where you finally have the chance to gain the ascendancy points, which by the way is when I started to feel very powerful. You basically go through trials, and the trials implement roguelike mechanics where you go through many rooms with either buffs or debuffs, and completing them will give you loot and ascendancy points. You can use these points to upgrade your character on top of the already very overwhelming skill tree. This game is just pure fun. That's it. Some bosses were pretty frustrating, like the Act 2 boss. Finding great loot feels very nice, and I love that I can wear any armor type and use any weapon if my stats meet the requirements. It's obviously not smart to wear whatever, but I appreciate the freedom. Upgrading all your weapons and armor with runes feels really nice, and upgrading your skills and abilities with skill gems feel very noticeable. Okay, Path of Exile 2 so far is amazing. You want to know what else is amazing? A word from our very first sponsor. Have you ever? Great graphics, easy controls, satisfying and addictive combat with some of the best particle effects in a game like this. Good story with well-written NPC dialogue and great voice acting. Decent zones to fight through, a crap load of enemy types and fantastic boss battles that's backed by great music, and the battles keep your heart pumping so fast it's nauseating. It's a game to play for many hours to come, and if you're not enjoying it or having a hard time, maybe just respec or change your class. If you're a fan of Souls games and ARPGs, this is the perfect mix. Path of Exile 2 right now, to me, obviously it's just my opinion guys, and I know a lot of you Diablo fans are going to be raging, 9 out of 10. The game does have some bugs, server, and balancing issues, but they're being worked on so fast by the team that I don't even feel like it's necessary to mention them. After all, it's still in early access, and I can't believe a game like this will be completely free in the future. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe. It's kind of funny. In a world where PoE 2 and Marvel Rivals release at the same time, we can only hope that some game studios that are hitting all-time low player counts this week will learn from all their mistakes and listen to fans for once. Thanks for watching.
いつでもそこにマクドだ